W.O.R.K.S starts with a special guest. This special guest will share with us his experiences with his money, with finances, and so on. So let's welcome Darren Hickie and share who you are.
Hello, thank you. Welcome everybody. Thank you for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm sat at home in snowy Lincolnshire at the moment in the UK. And I'm hoping to share with you a bit about my background, where I've come from, what I think of money and all sorts of things, and anything else you want to find out about me as well.
Yeah, will be great to know more about you and in which way you develop in your life, in your business.
Well, I mean, I really struggled when I was at school. As you might have seen in my introduction, I actually went to school in Africa in the 70s. I know I don't look that old, perhaps, maybe. My dad struggled getting a job, so we moved out to Africa, where there was plenty of jobs between the Americans and the English to mine for copper. And so I ended up doing most of my first bit of schooling over in Africa, which was great fun, quite an experience, but difficult to relate back to people when I'm back in the UK, because they talk about all sorts of things on the TV that I don't know anything about, because our life was spent outside, and TV started about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and started with the national anthem, finished at 11 o'clock, and that was about it. No one really bothered with TV, whereas I'm rubbish at quizzes, don't take me to a quiz. But that did hold me back when I went back to school in the UK. When I was about 10, I moved back to the UK to go to boarding school, and I struggled with my English language because, I was in an African country. I was learning Bemba. If anyone's heard of Bemba, it's quite a not very well-known language of Southern Africa. And so fortunately for me, one of the things I did excel at was numbers. I loved numbers. They just seemed to make a lot of sense to me. And so, I've always used that and used that to help other people as well. And so when I did leave school, I actually trained to be an accountant after I did a bit of business studies, which was quite interesting because it was an easy subject to me. But apparently when you go to school and do these kind of things, you also have to write, which was quite difficult for me to put together. But managed to become qualified in accountancy at a very young age, and so understood money from a very technical point of view in terms of where businesses would use it. I can understand profit and loss accounts and balance sheets and cash flows, etc. And also used a lot in my own personal life when I was growing up, because it's very important to look after, understand your own finances. And I always knew as a young child, I've always been accused of being a bit entrepreneurial, so I was always sort of wheeling and dealing as a child, trying to, sweets was a great commodity in Africa because not many people had them, so I always collected my sweets because I don't have a sweet tooth, and I always put them into jars. My mum was like, "Who are you selling them to now to make a little bit of money?" It was she thought it was quite fascinating, but I guess that was kind of like the start of my business skills at the beginning, and so from there I've grown lots of different skills, which I can go into a bit more as we go along with the interview tonight.
Yeah, so in which way, because you said that you learned about money on a technical side very, very early in your life, in which way it's a difference between this technical side from the company, from accountancy point of view, and how is different from the personal point?
So I've never really worried too much about money, because I know from my experience being in Africa that money doesn't really make you happy, it just helps you to buy things. And so I've never really been driven by money as such. I do like to earn it because I know what opportunities it can bring for me, and I do have some huge aspirations of what I want to do in the future personally. For example, I want to go and travel around Africa again. I've got young children now, so the plan at the moment is in around 2020. My kids will have finished school, and we're going to go and get a couple of trucks, do them up, and take probably 6 to 9 months and travel around Africa, just visiting the places I went to, where I went to school, so I can show my kids, and also the things that I didn't get to do whilst we were there, and go and explore some other places as well. But so you need money to be able to do those kind of things, but it's never really driven me. But I've always been very careful with it personally. I've always looked after my money. I know it's easy to get and to lose, and where I grew up with a lot of people that didn't have a great deal of money, and our money value in Europe, or seems like massive wealth compared to people in Africa who live off very, very little. But that it doesn't. People don't always understand personally the differences. Go, oh, you're rich. Well, you're only rich in the type of circumstances that you're in. The African people that I grew up with, they were rich in their own way. They didn't need lots of money. They became very resourceful, and I learned to be very resourceful and can pretty much turn my hand to pretty much anything, especially if I'm going to save a little bit of money as well. can do a bit of DIY and do all sorts of crazy projects which I've got going on, probably too many. My wife usually says, you've got so much going on, but that's me personally. I grew up in a world where resources were limited, and you have to make use of whatever you could. And as I said at the beginning, we weren't a very wealthy family, although it did appear to be when we went to Africa, because we got paid a reasonable UK equivalent wage, but we still had to make our money go further. So we didn't grow up with toys. I'll tell you a particular story, for example, in my personal life, where my sister and I, would play out in our garden all the time. She had a Cindy, I had an Action Man, and we didn't have all the accessories and things to go with it. So there was an abundance of clay, and so my sister and I set out about creating a Cindy swimming pool, because we thought it'd be great fun for Cindy and Action Man to play and have a swimming pool, because that's what we had around. And so we built a clay swimming pool for them to get to to play around in, because you just couldn't buy those kind of toys. So for us, it wasn't necessarily about having money to buy the toys. You just couldn't have them. You just didn't have them. In the same way as sweets and chocolates and things like that. It would just by the time it came through the borders and everything, there'd just be nothing left. So we just never really bothered with growing up with sweets and chocolates and things like that. And even still today, I don't have a sweet tooth. I'd rather have something much more savoury. And it wasn't necessarily about having the money to be able to go and buy things. It just wasn't in our cultural upbringing to do it. We had replacements for snacks like sugar cane, which is a bit like bamboo, and you just sort of tear off the outside bit and you chew this kind of gritty type thing, and you suck out some sugar. It's quite sweet. If you haven't had sugar cane, you just chew it. Not great for your teeth. But in comparison, we also had something called biltong. I think they call it jerky in America. So it's basically sort of dried meat, usually some kind of game meat that's spiced. It's probably been hung out with flies and all sorts of things over 4 or 5 days, which doesn't sound very appealing. But it was great. It was our snack, and it kept us healthy, and that's what was available. It's just what was there. When you grow up with something different, you just accept what's there.
Yeah. And nowadays, what money means to you?
For me, I'm trying to build my wealth. I'm trying to increase my family's wealth. I don't want my children or their children's children, our family, to be in a position where it is perhaps, tight and difficult. I have been through some tight spots myself, and even after understanding and realizing what money can and can't do for you and what you should do with it, sometimes you go a little bit crazy and, go off the rails. But for me, it's about trying to put in a structure that will allow us to have enough money to live from, have some money savings in a pot that we would perhaps use for an emergency. And when that becomes a surplus, then move that into what I call my third structure of money wealth gathering, which is about then buying some assets, things that can actually make money. I'm a huge fan of Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'm sure lots of people have read it. It was something I read probably about 10 or 15 years ago, and it gave me a huge insight into, although I understood company finances, I didn't understand my own personal wealth growth, and that's what kind of changed it for me. So now I go, I've started building a property portfolio, I've started building companies, and I've got 3 companies on the go, one that's been going longer, another one that's kind of getting going, and another new one. And anyway, I invest in Bitcoins. Bitcoins is a huge topic around at the moment. I've been actually mining it, which is a whole subject on its own, to try and generate wealth. And back 4 years ago when I started mining Bitcoins, which is basically you plug this machine in, burn a load of electric, create loads of heat and noise, and it creates coins out of thin air, which is just like unbelievable in this world that we're in. We can just create money out of thin air, which is amazing. But you start back then with something little and it grows, and it's all about getting the right kind of assets. I suppose where I see a lot of my friends and people go wrong is they have a look at what they think is buying an asset, and it's usually their own home. Well, you can't earn money off your own home. You have to pay off your mortgage and things like that. I understand that, but you need to buy things that make money, like houses you can rent out, or they go and buy a nice fancy car. Your cars lose money. They cost you money as well. I'd rather drive around in an older car and use that money to go invest in something else. Even premium bonds has got to be better than buying a car that's just going to lose you a load of money. So, personally, I look at it very differently, and that's how I view it, is this sort of 3-stage process that I go through. So you have your first part, which is your everyday stuff. You try and create a surplus from that, put it into your emergency fund. So, years ago, I used to just be able to cover replacing a washing machine or something like that, £200 or £300. Now, it's a slightly bigger pot for other things that need to go on. But when that becomes a surplus, then take it away and take it into a longer term investment, which is, buying a property, buying an antique, whatever it is, whatever you're interested in. So that's kind of personally how I manage my money now.
You said about the friends and people around you who had some reactions when you heard that you invest in Bitcoins or investing in other income streams. In which way you consider that the emotion and the beliefs affects our financial status?
Yeah, a lot of my friends have been with me all this time and seen me go through these stages where I'm quite fascinated to learn new things. So, obviously I was into Bitcoins way before most people have even heard about it. I invested in property before, people knew it was a good asset to be involved in. But, my friends saw that and their attitude and approach, and I don't blame them, but they see it differently to me. They're much more conservative. They go down the approach of, their parents taught them to work hard, pay off their mortgage, get their pension, and retire. And that's a great philosophy to go through. But I think the world today has changed massively. And I just couldn't see that working for me. I couldn't, I stayed in my first job for about 5 years and moved on. And I realized that, I was going to have millions of pensions by the time I got to my retirement. And that wasn't the way to do it. And it wasn't a way to excel my family beyond, from our not so wealthy beginnings. I'm not suggesting I'm wealthy or anything like that yet, but I'm building it up. But a lot of my friends are quite happy to just stay on that slow, steady path. And I find it a bit frustrating for them, because I think ultimately they will look back with a little bit of regret, and sometimes their attitude, although they're good friends to me, is, well, you're lucky. And I don't think it is anything to do with luck. It's about you. Well, if it is, you create your own luck, and they have that same opportunity, or even greater opportunities than I had. I've had some difficulties in my growing up and my backgrounds I started from. They've perhaps found it easier to integrate into the British culture. I am British, but I wasn't here for most of my childhood, so I didn't understand the ways of the world. I had a huge learning curve, and they had a massive advantage beyond, ahead of me to get on with it. And actually, they put themselves into this pigeonhole where they just said, well, this is our lot, this is where we are. I'm like, well, that's another 40 or 50 years away. Why just accept that now? And I suppose it's just my nature where I'm well, let's challenge it. Let's go and see how we can make it different, how we can grow it quicker. It has its pitfalls. I'm not going to sit here and say to you that it's all been smooth. I've had some horrendous investment opportunities, lost loads of money. But you pick yourself up and you learn from it. And I'm just a big lifelong learner, and just want to keep going at the challenge. And it's getting tiring as you get a little bit older, but you're a bit wiser, so you take a bit more of an educated investment, a bit more cautious investment now. But you've still got to take a little bit of a gamble. But that's why I have my 3-stage system, so that you don't ruin your day-to-day. Every living, you've got a little bit of a buffer, and then you grow your finances. And I share that with all my friends, but they just approach it differently. They don't want to do that. I've taken friends to seminars when we've learned about property in my early days, and they've just walked away and going, well, that guy's just talking rubbish. It's all right. He can stand on stage and just say this, that, and the other. Or their attitude is that they can't be bothered. They'd rather just go and sit at home and watch TV when they get home from work and waste away their lives. They can probably tell you all the characters in every single TV series, whereas I've got no clue at all. I'm afraid it just doesn't interest me, and I don't have time to do that. I'm always looking for the next sort of exciting scheme to get into. So yeah, I suppose my attitude and approach is very different to some of my friends. I don't envy them. Hopefully they don't envy me. But we're just different people, and we approach it differently.
You mentioned about the opportunities, and the question is, in which way the opportunities can help you or not, or in which way you can see the opportunities related by your financial, not necessarily having or not having money, but knowing how to approach that, or what influence the opportunities and the nurturing in your life.
The opportunities are, like I said before, I think you create your own luck and opportunities. For example, when I left boarding school, all my family was still in Africa, so I didn't know what to do. I had nowhere to go live. I didn't have any family here to guide me. Luckily, my parents did have a house that they rented to my uncle, and so I moved in with my uncle for a short period. Unfortunately, we didn't get on very well, and he moved out. But what happened was, as I was, what would I have been, 17, 18 maybe, I was trying to put myself through college, and I had this 4-bedroom this semi-detached house that I lived in, that all of a sudden I needed to find out how to pay the bills. I did find out from some of my much more educated people who I was at college with that you can actually go and sign on, it was called those days, and so I was able to get £37.50 a week, which seemed like a fortune to me. People just give you money for nothing. I didn't get it, but I was willing to take it because I had the gas, electric, water bills, all the bills. I was 18 years old. I didn't really know what else to do. Council tax or poll tax, as it was back then. I had all these bills to pay. Well, so then some people could turn around and say, well, that's unfortunate. What would you do? You can go and plead poverty. You can cry over spilt milk or whatever, or you could have a look at it as an opportunity. And so that was my first experience of looking into how I can fill this house. And obviously I had a really good audience of people to go to and say, anybody want to rent a room? So I rented out my parents' house and managed to pay the bills. I did offer to pay them money for the mortgage. And then I creamed off a bit off the top. I took 10% of the rental income. I managed all of the rent books for them, repairs, etc. And so that was my first experience of being, kind of a landlord out of an opportunity where I could have, had to have moved in with some friends or bunked around or whatever. It was, well, let's grab this opportunity, let's make it work. And I got a little bit of money out of it and learned how to manage properties, which I can now carry through into proper management of properties. So, yeah, it's just about looking for those opportunities where they're there. Again, maybe I'm a bit different, and I just look at I see things a bit different. I'm a bit crazy, according to my friends, maybe.
It's important that it's working for you.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, the idea is that you mentioned more income streams for you. Why is it important to have that, to not rely only on one?
Look, the world changes very quickly, and I'm a geek, I'm afraid. I love technology, and I can see how very quickly our world is changing. And you may have one thing that works right now, even just taking a job, for example. My parents were growing up, they struggled to get a job, but before them, their parents, they got a job, they stayed there for life. I remember my grandparents, my granddad got a watch, and things were being, the number of years he stayed in work. Well, now it doesn't happen like that. You can go and get a job, this week, and you don't know if you're going to be there next month, the month after. You can get made redundant, the company can close down, you can go bankrupt. So you just can't rely on one income stream at all. And also as economies change, anybody remembers through to the recent recession problems with 2008, 2009, that was massive problems for people. Well, some of those income streams will dry up, but it also creates some others, and others that weren't doing so well will pick up. And so it's just about having a cross balance so that you are balanced in terms of your overall income, rather than just relying on one stream to come in, because it doesn't always happen that way. It can easily be swiped away from underneath you. For example, Bitcoin's may crash and burn next week. Well, I rode the ride, it was fun, move on. I've still got some other things. It's not going to turn me into bankruptcy overnight. I've got other income streams to come along. Rental properties, if anybody's thinking going into that, isn't all plain sailing that everyone thinks or says it is, on stage. There are some months where more than 50% of my properties could become empty. Well, the bills still need to be paid, the mortgages still need to be paid. It costs money to go and find tenants. If they've trashed the place, you have to spend some money doing it up. So you have to allow for all sorts of those things, and these ebbs and flows happen constantly through your year, your life, sometimes weekly. So it does happen that quickly sometimes. So yeah, I think it's really, really important to edge your bets in lots of different things, doing usually things you're interested in, because otherwise it can be quite depressing as well if you're pushing, treacle up the hills, is a phrase that sometimes used. It's not so much fun when the hard times hit. So find something interesting, or a few things interesting, and work on those to generate your income, is my theory.
For most of the people, to have more income streams means to have 2, 3, 4 jobs. Why is it important to have at least one, if not only one, active income streams, and the rest to be passive? Why is the big difference, and why is it important to have that?
Yeah, well, we're human beings. However much I love my geeky side of things. I'd love to be a robot that never needs to sleep. We do need to sleep. We need to rest. We need to socialize. It's in our human nature. And to make something work successfully, I believe that you can only focus on one thing at a time. And so if you're having multiple streams of income, then that basically relies on the fact that you need passive income, which is, properties, any sort of things. Having lots of jobs is just going to tire you out. I don't think that's going to help in the long run. So I'm not suggesting you'd never do that. I have done that where I've had several jobs just to accumulate a bit of wealth to be able to go and invest in something else. It's about taking a bit of surplus, creating some surplus to go and create something that will residually create, continuously create money afterwards or thereafterwards to grow. And sometimes, when you're starting out, you don't have money. Whatever people say, you do need money of some description, whether it's yours or you can borrow from other people, which means you've got to convince them. You're going to be careful with their money to be able to go and grow something or build extra money. There's very few and far between things I can think of where you can actually generate wealth out of nothing. It's very unlikely. So yeah, you need work on one thing, get that running. If it's a business, make sure it's not just a hobby. Make sure it generates money, build your team, let people run it for you, then move on to the next project and run that, or sell the business, generate some income, some capital basically, and then go and invest that, and then work on to the next business. So don't my experience, and I'm not preaching to people here because I'm pretty bad at it myself, because I'm an opportunist. And these things come along like buses. There's none for a while, and all of a sudden there's three, and you can't turn any of them down, because although no is a shorter word than yes, it's much nicer and funner to go with yes, and you try a couple of them. But focus is definitely something I'm learning. I'm getting better at, and I need to. I do much better when I focus on one thing at a time. I'm not quite there yet. I'm trying very hard.
Okay, the learning is very important, and I agree that we learn till the last day of our life. Please tell me in which way, coming about that technical side of money on company and personal view on your personal side, do you have or do you make a distinction between company's money and your personal money?
Oh, most definitely, yeah. I think you need to. I always view everything I do is put into a silo. It just helps me to organize things in my head, and that includes how the money runs within it. It's very easy to make a mistake where you make some money from a sale, maybe a hobby business, but there's a lot of expenses that come with that, usually followed by some kind of tax bill. And that's where most great companies fail, is they dip in and out of their businesses to satisfy their own personal needs. And I think if you think of it as generating assets, then in this silo, your challenge isn't to make the sale. Obviously, you've got to make sales, but it isn't just making the sales. It's about generating a profit. And that's one of the things I learned at very early days is, turnover is fantastic, but you could have a £10 million turnover company making £1,000 profit. Well, that sounds like a lot of hard work to me. I'd rather have a £10,000 turnover company and a £1,000 profit, because generally the effort going into generating the 10,000 isn't a great deal, and I can spend that time going on to other things. But you've got to silo it, because at some point you'll have to pay expenses, insurances, staff, third-party contractors, whatever it is, tax, always tax, and you can't afford to put that off, because that will ruin you and stress you out, and you'll always be playing a catch-up game if you don't silo it off and make sure that money's paid for in advance. And all my different pots, whether it be if I'm investing in property, for example, it's not the property portfolio that generates the profit. It's each property, because I need to know which one is a dud and which one's very profitable, over a period of time. You can have a property for a couple of years that's very successful, or a property for 15 years that's just ticking over. You should have got rid of that. You need to look at each one in a silo, as I would do for each one. And for anything I do, and not dip into it, then personally, I think the way I view it is that these things are generating money, and I'll cream it off and put it into my personal wealth, and then decide what I want to do with it. Sometimes you may go and spoil yourself and buy that frivolous car or whatever it is you fancy doing, but you must take a good chunk of it and go and invest in some more assets, because as we get older, we need to keep generating money, and we have less time, and you have children and things like that, and so it's about making sure that is separated from the business running to what you need personally. I've always found that whatever money you earn, whether it be employment or from investments, however much money you have, generally as human beings, we're really great at just spending whatever we get, and that's not always the best way personally to handle your money. You need to have some restraint and control over yourself to go, well, we can manage off that. It's not all about showing off the latest branded clothing or whatever it is. I need to actually make that money work for me, because if you haven't got a pension, for example, you need something to give you money when you retire, when you can't work, or when you stop working. So yeah, I think for me there's a massive distinction in where the money sits within different places.
What do you recommend to the audience when it's coming about money and financial education?
Well, firstly, I think that schools don't give enough financial education. People aren't taught how to look after their money, what it is. And at the end of the day, it's just a piece of paper or an IOU from the bank, but it's how you use it that's important. And I do hope and wish that kids were taught a bit more about managing their money, because I think there is a small generation out there that we're so focused on making them being able to pass their exams in maths, English, geography, or whatever it is, that we actually forgot to teach them some common sense and life lessons about how to cook and how to manage their money. And that's how a lot of people ended up in problems through the financial crisis, whereas other people did very well out of the financial crisis. So, I'm always on a journey to try and learn a bit more about it, whether it be from seminars, from online courses, YouTube, or books. I love reading books. I used to hate reading books when I was younger, but I'm always looking for something to just pick up a little nugget here and there about something, or looking at things differently. Even if I read a book that I don't necessarily agree with, you can always glean somebody else's insight into things, whether I use any of it or not. It just gives me a much more rounded perspective. So, like you said, we're always on a lifelong lesson to learn, whether it be from the people around us or whether it's from books or seminars. You should continuously push yourself. We don't use a great deal of our brains, apparently, according to the scientists. Why not? Why not push it a bit further? We've got it in here, we nurture it, we carry it around with us every single day. Let's go and we exercise in the gym, but we don't always necessarily educate and exercise our muscle brain, which we should be doing. So yeah, I'm a big advocate of doing that. At the moment, I set myself a challenge of trying to read at least one book. I know it doesn't sound a great deal, but when you come from a background where you're not a great reader, one book a month, it's quite a challenge for me. Sometimes they're really small books and sometimes they're massive books. But it's usually because I've got some idea of something I want to pick up. So I would always, anybody out there listening, just start reading. Turn off the TV. You don't need to watch somebody else's life for an hour. Just read a book for an hour. You'll learn so much more, and it'll help your brain to organize yourself rather than living somebody else's life. You can go and, like I said at the beginning, create those opportunities and set your own life up and your own structure for the future, which I think is much more powerful than watching somebody live their life for an hour in a room or a jungle or wherever it is. I'm not saying don't watch any TV. That equally can be educating, and you need to relax as well. So I do watch those things occasionally, but if you're not reading a great deal, you're not going to any seminars, then you really need to start having a look at it. £49 or £100 to go to a seminar for a weekend. You can get so much by learning from the people around you, from the speakers. There's so much out there, so much information. Even just spending time looking on the internet, there's a lot out there, but it's very easy to get distracted. I know I'm talking from a geek point of view, and I love technology and the internet, but I think we're very easily distracted as human beings. If you go to a seminar or a course, you need your focus, and they're much better in terms of getting things, remembering things out the back of it than necessarily surfing around the internet, which you might find educational.
About the books, by the way, my book called Who Cut the Cat's Tail? Practical Guide of Financial Freedom can be pre-ordered now and will be launched at the beginning of next year. And I will have autograph session at the Author Award in March. This Author Award is offered by W.O.R.K.S. So welcome to come, and welcome to pre-order my book.
I definitely put it on my list. At this time of year, somewhere between Christmas and New Year, I normally sit down and look at what my reading list is going to be for the next year. I look at what I've read, and so I'd love to put your book on my list. I think that would be quite exciting. I've met you a couple of times now. I find you incredibly fascinating, and I'm sure it'd be a great insight and a great book to read. So yeah, I'd recommend your listeners to give it a go as well.
Thank you.
I too am going to try, and I've written a couple of books already. I'm looking to write my third one. It's in production. So I think it's a great way of sharing your knowledge with people, and it gives them a great insight into who you are and your little tips that you picked up along your way in your journey as well. So I think it's a great idea. I think writing a book is very powerful. It's quite difficult as well. So I admire you. I have a lot of respect for you.
Sometimes can be very easy, so you can join the next event, red carpet event, make the news in January. Will be the last one before the Author Awards. There you can share your story and also connect with a lot of amazing and positive people. I found that environment very powerful and very nurturing for me as a person and for me as a business. So definitely learning and keeping you up to date, because as we know, in life we have only two options, to grow or to die. So I wish everyone to grow. I wish everyone to develop, to grow personally and on the business. So Darren, thank you very, very much for your sharing, for your experiences shared here. And I hope to have you again in my show. And why not to see you at Author Awards in March? Maybe you can have their launch book, and why not?
Sounds like a great idea. Send me over some dates. I'd love to get that into my diary, and definitely I do want to read your book. It's definitely going on my list for the new year. So thank you very much for recommending it. It'd be very useful. And like you say, those events where you get together with people you wouldn't normally mix with is so powerful. Never be dismissive of anybody that you think they're not your type of person. You can learn so much from somebody that isn't like you. If you always hang around with people like yourself, you're never going to change or grow. You're always going to be the same person. So yeah, I'd highly recommend going to an event like that. I'll certainly try and squeeze something into my diary if I can. And thank you hugely for inviting me onto the show. It's been great fun, and I'd love to come back and share some more wisdom with you and go into a few more stories as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. See you next week on Tuesday. Starting with next week, the shows will be at 8 p.m. on Tuesday. See you then. Bye.
Bye.